Before we begin, thank you very much to the Studio Trigger fan himself, Centimus Prime, for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the contribution. Thank you for your patience in waiting for your shout out, by the way. Pitched in at the highest tier, gets a video request, but also that was a long time to wait. We're catching up. We are catching up. Thank you everyone for the support. Helps me keep everything coming. Presents new opportunities to me, allows for new opportunities. Who saw the Mega Man video? Because I actually got to do work with Capcom on my favorite video game franchise. Kind of incredible. Go watch if you didn't. Okay, let's get back to the debate, because once again, a series that was supposed to be happening like every other week is happening like every other month. Not my intention. We need to fix that, but we'll get back onto it for now. So, does toy size scale matter to you? And honestly, I didn't expect a 2-to-1 victory in favor of scale. I kind of figured it would tip in favor of scale, but that's actually pretty dramatic. That's actually way higher than I anticipated. So, good on you. Good on you. We've had so many toys over the years where it feels like either adhering to scale has been a detriment to them, either because they cannot be done at that size, like a few Bumblebees come to mind, or they're because of their size, they just very rarely get new toys. It's your Scorponok, your Fort Max, etc. So yeah, like defying the scale is how we get those characters out. So I was kind of hoping that would like tip it a little bit more to be even. No, 2-to-1 victory. So scale does matter. And ultimately, I do agree. I do prefer when all my stuff seems to be like the logical size for everything. Today, however, we have a three-way debate, because we are here to discuss gimmickry and the gimmickry of the original G1 toy line, and that comes down to the Masters. Now, in this video, we are going to be focusing on the three big ones of G1. The Headmasters, the Power Masters, the Target Masters. The three that came with little guys to help enhance the play value of your big guys. We do acknowledge there are other Masters in existence, however. While we will be focusing on the main three today that were available in the US, we do acknowledge that Micro Masters and Action Masters are technically master gimmicks, but kind of in name only. They just really liked calling their like gimmicky bots masters. So we know for fact what we're talking about here. We want the little guys. So before we really get into that debate, let's cut this one off too. We will not be covering the Brain Masters today. While the gimmick is fun, I find that they fill the exact same niche as Headmasters, but they don't have the same level of playability to them. They still have some of those more unfortunate flaws, the fragility issues, and they add another one. If the spring wears out in the little brain guy, then you're kind of out your big toy. So I find them to be largely the same kind of function as Headmasters, but honestly, I don't think the execution is as good. So we'll leave them for another day. We'll focus on the main three that everyone is familiar with now. But in that regard, we're going to start with the Headmasters, because I genuinely think this is the favorite amongst Transformer collectors, and I'll be honest, yeah, it is my favorite as well. So, for the uninitiated, we'll go through very quick explanations for those who weren't there in G1 to actually know what these were. Headmasters was a pretty simple concept. The head of the Transformer could be removed and transformed into a little guy. Said little guy could pilot the vehicle and or animal mode that the main body transformed into. Thus, you had the one thing that Transformers prior to this never actually got, which were pilots. They all turned into vehicles, but none of them had drivers or pilots. You know, when you start thinking about it, it's kind of a glaring omission, especially from a company that brought you G.I. Joe, whose whole thing is vehicles with pilots. So it's a really cool addition. It's a natural, like, way of giving you some extra playability to a Transformer and giving you that play value that once you get it, feels like it should have been there from the start. The heads would also do this cool thing where when you plug it in, there's a window on the chest that you can open up and see the stats, the main 3 stats, your strength, intelligence, and speed. You could see the stats of the robot come up when you plug the head in, and all the heads were differently coded. So they all switched, like they all made the same stats go up regardless of what robot body you connected them to, which is a neat idea. That's actually a really neat idea. I do think it missed a trick, because for years I thought like the tumblers inside the chests were also different levels depending on each body. But apparently not, because I've swapped heads with headmasters recently and got the same results. So, oh well, would have been a nice trick. Still, yeah, play value here is great. Also, I'm sure engineers loved not having to figure out where the head goes. Yes, the tumbler gimmick kind of took up the chest of all these toys, but yeah, you don't really have to worry about like where the head is going to hide when you just remove it. So probably a relief to some of them. Now, one aspect of these and why we're focusing on these 3 gimmicks specifically is because all 3 of these were the ones that were doubled in G1. But to double a headmaster, you literally have to make the largest transformer to ever exist and would ever exist all the way into the 2010s. Yeah, so Fortress Maximus, great figure. The double headmaster thing is great. You basically have to make a normal sized transformer that turns into a head, and his head turns into a tiny transformer in order to make a double headmaster work. It does work though, and it does create a really cool toy. It does create a really cool play pattern, etc., etc. But that said, aside from the fact that this was really the only way to double up the gimmick, which became cost prohibitive, there's also a lot of pitfalls to headmasters. I find more pitfalls to these than any of the others. For instance, if you lost the head, you're out your toy. That's the cost of making the head removable. In Japan, they had the idea of selling individual heads, which served as not only playability options, but also replacements if you needed them. Those still rank as some of the rarest Transformers because they never came out in the US. Later on, when Hasbro redid this gimmick for Titan's Return, they had the same idea of packing in extra heads with little extra accessory things that they came with and combined with. Point being, yeah, back then, kids in the US didn't have that option. If the head was gone, you have no toy anymore. But also, the headmasters had a particular design flaw to them. So, the plate on their back that was the face of the robot mode was just one flat plate. And their shoulders were squared off flat plates against them. So when trying to raise the arms like you would know a normal transformer, 50-50 odds the peg broke because it's forcing a lot of plastic to cross paths here. Many old headmasters you will find with broken arms because of this particular design flaw. One that for whatever reason they just never realized when they put these toys together. Kind of an oversight if you ask me. So headmasters kind of have like, while the gimmick might be the most popular, it definitely has the most pitfalls and flaws to it. Now that brings us to the Target Masters. This one is a pretty simple concept in nature. Every Transformer comes with some kind of gun accessory. At least they did back in the 80s. So, if you actually want the gun to actually mean something and not just be some random accessory that can be lost, misplaced, and you just don't really care, instead, let's turn it into its own character and make it transform into a little robot itself. And that's where you get the Target Master idea from. And in that, it's kind of a novel little idea. It definitely makes the guns a little bit more important. You know, I definitely care more about them, given that they're these little partner figures for the larger toys. Now, these do have one big advantage over the other masters in that the Target Master is not required for anything, meaning that the base figure is completely 100% functional with or without the Target Master, meaning you could have that Target Master with another toy. You could lose it. You could just straight up lose the Target Master and it wouldn't matter. You don't have to go running from a toy, to your toy bins, shuffle through. What did I do with Point Blank? What did I do with pinpointer? Where is, like, you don't have to worry about any of that. You can just transform the toy as normal, and everything's fine. Now, well, and yeah, so doubling up. This is pretty simple. So the fact is, yeah, you come with two weapons. That's literally all that the doubling up on this one means. They tried to make them combine. They never really looked great when combined, but I do appreciate the idea that it's easy to do. Unlike, Fort Max, when you had to double up a headmaster. Here, there really isn't any, like, risk reward to it or anything. It's just, it comes with an extra gun that also transforms. So this was the easy one to double up. And I think this was by far like the most common to double. But that said, you do lead to the inherent flaws of the target master. So there's two for starters. Number one is, and this is kind of minor, but like when you see what the power masters do, you kind of like, well, why don't these pilot anything? Why can't I use these as drivers? Which would seem logical, right? If the headmasters could be drivers, so could the target masters. But they didn't see it that way because this is Transformer play patterns. We're supposed to stick the gun on top of the roof and pretend that looks normal. So that's what they wanted us to do with the target masters. Hence, they rode up on top instead of inside the vehicle. The other thing is, target masters on their own, let's be honest here, kind of dull. They don't really do anything on their own. They don't even have a level of articulation. That goes in with the fact that, they can't be pilots for the vehicles. But, yeah, like, even on their own, they'll have the advantage of usually looking cooler than Power Masters or Headmasters when they're in robot mode. But that's all you really get, is, like, the visual distinction. No arm articulation, nothing in the legs, no nothing. So you just kind of got left with a basic accessory that stood beside your Target Master large robot. So not the most exciting of the gimmicks, but like the least amount of like detriment to it, Like there's no real risk to a Target Master. You just got an extra accessory that does some neat stuff along with your fully functional robot, which by the way, can do things that Headmasters can't because the gimmick is not taking up any part of their body. There's another big advantage to them. But then we have to talk about the Power Masters. And for the sake of argument, we're going to talk Power Masters, not the Breast Force, not God Masters. Simple old Power Masters that got released in the US and the rest of the world. This was another novelty gimmick, but kind of an understandable one. So, when in vehicle mode, the Transformer needed an engine to be plugged into it, and when the engine was plugged in, it unlocked internal mechanisms that allowed the robot to transform. So, in the idea of Transformers, where they are so powerful, they need this extra block to power them up in order to transform. There is something very thematic about a Power Master. You do feel like you are powering your Transformer up so that they can transform and go into combat. That part of it's actually kind of neat, And it does lead to, a little bit more of a symbiotic relationship compared to the others. Well, I guess comparable to the Headmasters. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea, especially because, it's an engine. So when you're dealing with a bunch of car transformers, or in some weird cases, planes with exposed engines, and hello Darkwing and Dreadwind. Still, novel idea. Like it's a forebear to like keys unlocking things on Transformers. This one had the coolest double up of them all. That was Double Dealer. Okay, depending on which engine I'm plugging into him, he can either turn into his robot mode or into a Condor mode. And depending on which one he is at the time, he is either presenting Autobot or presenting Decepticon. That's cool. I like that. I like that a lot. So, yeah, of all the doubling, the Power Master absolutely won out. I wish they'd done it more. I wish it wasn't just the one time, because this was a really neat idea and gave us technically our first double agent. I mean, you had Punch Counterpunch, but fictionally that was known to be an Autobot with a Decepticon disguise. This is legitimately a double agent who doesn't care what side he's working for. He's a mercenary getting paid. That's Double Dealer. And I love that they use this gimmick to present his character. That said, Power Masters did come with the obvious flaw of, do you really want to have to run and grab a figure and plug it in just to transform a Transformer? I've got a Blur that I got, last year that does the exact same thing without having to plug anything in. Yeah, it's kind of neat, but you've also added an obstacle to what, instead of enhancing how a Transformer functions, you can argue that you've added an obstacle to how it's supposed to function. So, it's a little bit frustrating. It's a little bit frustrating. The good news here is that a lot of them didn't technically require the motor, the engine to be installed, because the Power Master just hits a set of pins that are exposed in the vehicle mode. If you can hit those pins yourself, you don't really need the motor installed. But that said, sometimes that didn't work out. On Power Master Optimus Prime here, it's fine. It's fine. You can just push in that grill. So if you hit that little white switch that gets pushed in with it, you can transform him just fine. On the other hand, there are some figures where you just saw with Getaway in the previous slide. If you don't have his motor installed, it's a big gap in him. So you had a few situations like that where if you didn't have the Power Master, it looked pretty ugly. So yeah, you had your flaw there. You had your flaw there. I will say, despite having a similar idea to a Headmaster, Power Masters actually avoided the biggest flaw, which is the fragility. A lot of the Power Masters actually had arms that were rounded off. Seems like they came around later in the design process and someone figured out, oh, hey, maybe we shouldn't make these things easily breakable. So the little figures tended to look a lot better. They tended to be more colorful. They tended to have better function to them as individual characters. Arms that didn't break was great. You can even splay the legs out a little bit thanks to how they all transformed. It's kind of a interesting little dichotomy. So even there, they gained just a little bit of an advantage that's fun to play with. So, these are the pluses and minuses of the big three. And that leads me to one thing. Which one is your favorite? So, as usual with the debate videos, in the description below, you will find a link to a straw poll, which will give you the option to choose one of these three. Please, in order to participate, go to that link, click an option, vote. Let your voice be heard, and the next time we do a debate video, we will take a look at the results. So, that is what I have for you today. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.